myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome along to NUFC Matters. It's Friday night and it's 3 Amigos night, and it's a big welcome to Steve Hasty and Mitch. We've got no Ian Mearns this week after we've had him on the last couple of weeks, but we've also had a couple of people message in saying that they haven't felt that the format was the same. They felt that that things had changed a little bit and they'd rather just have the three of us. And then I've also had a couple of complaints in about Mitch always being, smoking and drinking. Steve, have you had those same ones?
Yeah. There was a lady from Wallsend rang us up complaining about him. Said it was absolutely shocking and he needed sorting out. So
we should call Marty by any chance.
Don't say that we don't listen to our listeners, because we thought we'd better bring somebody in this week to sort the mess out that Mitch was creating. Welcome George to the show tonight.
Hey.
Good evening, George.
Steve.
For those of you who don't know, that George is Mitch's dad. So we've sorted this out for the last couple of weeks. We thought we'd get George on for a bit of advice on how to deal with Mitch, but also because he's been watching Newcastle a hell of a lot longer than we have, and we think it would be great to have him on as a guest this week. So welcome, George. I'm sure your input will be.
Thanks, Steve. Do appreciate it, and thanks for letting us be part of this. I really appreciate it. It's good.
No, fantastic. Great to have you on. Just a little bit, George, about you. When was your first game?
When listening to you talking about your first game set me off thinking about that. And it was 1945-46 season. And I was taken to a FA Cup third round, first leg third round, between Newcastle and Barnsley. Taken by my two uncles, Tom and John, who Neil will know. They've been trying. I mean, I was just a child, and I was a baby almost. I was only 4.5 years old, but these two had been desperate to get me to St James's Park, because when we played in the back garden, my dad was in the RAF, so these two were like surrogate fathers. They were like two big brothers, really. They were so daft. It was lovely. And they were desperate to get me to go. And they couldn't think of how to do it because my mother and my granny wouldn't let us go. And the grandfather wasn't very happy either and thought they had to get up a ruse. And so they said to my grandfather, look, we want to take the laddie to the third round against Barnsley, the first leg. And we've had a rumour that Stanley Matthews is at Euston Airport with the RAF, and I let them on leave, and he's coming down to play for Barnsley. So the significance to that was that my grandfather was from Hanley and Stoke, and his favourite player was Stanley Matthews. So immediately they'd opened the door to letting us go to the match. So that's how it started. We won 4-2. Apparently, I was excited at every goal, including goals. Apparently, they took a wooden bench that slipped over the wall that went round the cinder track for me to sit on, and I think that my two uncles had set the lads either side of it. If he falls off, how knacker he is, and it was just great. That was the start of it, and from then on, whenever the chance came, these two uncles used to take us to the match. And of course, when my dad came up from the RAF, and my grandfather went, we had a great family time. It was fantastic. But that's how it started. It was my two uncles who were a pair of madcaps, really lovely guys, twins they were. Tom was the thinker, but John was he's the dream up all the schemes. If they were going to get in trouble, it was John's idea, but Tom got the blame because he was the one that usually did it. But it part of the growing up in a family that was not hasten to add, and that's why I love what you do. It wasn't just Newcastle daft; it was football daft. And that's what I think I like about what you lads do, because when you watch, yes, we expect to see a lot about Newcastle, but we also hear a lot of good sense about football. And I think that's something that Newcastle fans are in danger of losing. See, I've always thought Newcastle fans appreciated football as much as they did their team. Example, Neil's first match when Ian Rush, this 19-year-old kid, tore apart in the FA Cup. In lots of grounds, yes, in lots of grounds, he would have got booed off the pitch. Well, he didn't. Remember, he got applauded off the pitch.
Yeah,
you know,
applauded off the pitch. Absolutely.
People appreciated what he did. And then a couple of years ago, if you remember, Vardy came to St James's with a record of having scored in 11 consecutive Premiership games. And if he scored against us, that was 12, and he would take the record. Well, what was important to us as Newcastle fans was it was Shearer that held the record. So he was going to take one of Shearer's records. Now, he did it, but still the fans applauded what he did. And when he came off, he got a standing ovation. And I think there's not many grounds where that would happen these days. So, as I say, I love the fact that people get coming. Yes, they're going to get a lot of Newcastle United, and why not? But they're also going to get a lot of information about football as well. So,
it's great stuff. I've got to ask you about the FA Cup years. I mean, George, you're old enough to remember them. We're old enough to remember cup final defeats. I know you can remember a few of them as well, but 52, 51, 52, 55.
There's the rattle my father took to the two finals.
Wow.
The Arsenal final and the Blackpool final.
Brilliant.
It made in the shipyard in Swan Hunter's joiner shop at lunchtime. They had a production line, and a couple of the managers were Magpie supporters, and they just turned a blind eye while the lads were making all these things. My father got tickets for those two finals off his manager in Wallsend Slipway. And the tickets obviously were gold dust. Nobody could get a ticket. But my father's manager was a bloke called Jack Wright. And his son was an ex-guardsman. And he was working in Buckingham Palace as a bodyguard. And yet he could get a ticket just like that. And he gave them to his father. And his father passed them on to my dad. So my dad took a day off on the Friday, which normally would have got you the sack, but because it was his manager, he got away with it. And off he went hitchhiking to Wembley to go to these finals. And he went to both, and just fantastic, you know. So that's the sort of background, you know, the sort of keenness and energy there was in the family about football and about Newcastle United. So, and then there was the 55 one, the Manchester City one as well, which of course I remember too. But none of us went to that one. But
it was Milburn got the record, which only got beaten in recent years for the quickest goal in the FA Cup final that year.
Absolutely right. Yes, absolutely right. And I mean, obviously, another part of my background is this, as a 13-year-old, I started to go up to St James's Park on schoolboy forms and started to train, and with the prospect of signing on. And I was there for nearly 6 years. But it was just part of life. And when the idea that I might actually sign for Newcastle came around, I mean, the family were just elated, you know, just absolutely on top of the world. You know, they couldn't have been better. There were other clubs around, and maybe I'll talk about one of those later, Burnley. But it was always going to be Newcastle. There was never any doubt about that. Plus, what added to it was the school I went to. My PE teacher was a young lad called Alec Tate, who was just been centre forward in the first team, and that the year 56, 57, he scored a hat trick against the Mackhams in the derby match. He was a super lad, super fella, great teacher, but a lovely man as well. And I had the opportunities occasionally. Would play a school match on a Saturday morning, and he'd be there with us. And I'd hop into his little sports car with him, and we'd both go up to St James's Park to find out which team we're playing in on the Saturday afternoon. And odd couple of occasions we both ended up playing in the A team or the B team. So it was fantastic. It was a great time. But there was never any doubt about my involvement in Newcastle United and continuing onwards afterwards. So.
George, I think we could do an entire show on you. It's always great to hear. Always great to hear the memories. But we might come back to a little bit more on that later.
Yeah,
Let's start talking about Steve Hasty, and he gave his press conference today prior to this weekend's game against Burnley in the Premier League, and certainly let some steam off today, did Steve Bruce. Just reading through Craig Hope's article in the Daily Mail, he says that Steve Bruce has rejected criticism of his tactics at Newcastle United and asked those who question him, "What do you not understand?" Supporters and observers, of course, have raised concerns over the lack of identity about Bruce's side 14 months on from him taking charge. Bruce hit back, launching an irritated and passionate defence of his approach during a heated exchange with reporters on Friday. And this is what he had to say. "I find it disappointing and deeply frustrating, this thing about a lack of direction and tactics. What do you not understand?" he began. "Since I've walked through the door, I've said we'll try to change. It's been levelled at me there's no direction, but I've played the same formation in 5 of the last 6 games. We're trying to change a team that sit deep in back 5 to a forward-thinking back 4 with 2 up top and a bit of pace in wide areas. How long will it take? I'm not too sure. I didn't think we were ready for it last year, but I can't understand what the raging debate is. Let's not dissect it the way we are. I find it baffling. I really do. Look, we haven't played well enough. I'll grant you that. We haven't played with enough intensity, and we've given the ball away cheaply. But if you've watched us, what do you not understand in what we're trying to do? All of a sudden now, it's a raging debate. What's the debate? There it is. That's what we're trying to achieve." It was then pointed out to him that supporters can see the formation, but the criticism is aimed more at the style. So Bruce then says, the style's a concern. So all of a sudden we'll have to think we're Liverpool, do we? The style is we're going from a back 5 to a back 4 with 1 off the front. We were stylish against Morecambe and West Ham. We had 27 attempts against Newport. That's what we're trying to achieve. I think that would be pretty obvious if you were balanced about it. All this stuff about tactics and no direction, I just don't feel that it's balanced all right. Wow. Dear me, how, Steve? Where do we start with this? I mean, if there's anything that you do when the fans are starting to turn on you, and believe you me, the fans are really starting to turn on Bruce at this moment in time, you don't react like that, do you?
You certainly don't. I'm just sitting here gobsmacked listening to that because obviously I read it and you tend to like sort of speed read things, sometimes when you just spot them on Twitter, but just sitting there absorbing somebody else reading it out to you like that and taking it all in, and I just gobsmacked, absolutely gobsmacked. I take it that when he signed for Newcastle, Ashley handed him like a DVD, and it turned out to be Football Manager 2005 and not Football Manager 2020, because quite frankly, that's what it appears to be. Like he's singing from some sort of like rehearsed sheet that he's probably pulled out of his pocket that he's had at every club since he started. Whenever he suddenly hit a bad patch, and I think we could rip them apart if we wanted to on many number of things, and I'm sure Mitch will be dead happy to. But 5 wins since Christmas, for goodness sake, in the Premier League, a run that is absolutely shocking, performances that are absolute dire, and you just sit there thinking, what am I watching? Because he's watching a totally different game. I know that football managers tend to have rose-coloured specs, or they tend to look at a game in a slightly different way. But dear me, he's looking at it from a completely different angle to every Newcastle fan that I'm aware of. If Twitter and Facebook and all the other mediums are anything to go by, the WhatsApp messages that I get from pals who I'm not attending the match with at the moment, or sitting in the pub with, but are still connected on WhatsApp, and we're still talking football because we love it. We're still talking Newcastle United because we love it. And we're all, to a man, absolutely bereft at what we're watching.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had to mute you there, George. I heard the chase music coming on. We'll get done for copyright.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not sure if I heard that. I'm sure I heard the chase anyway. It might have been something different, but anyway.
No, you're right. You're right.
No worries, mate. You've got it. You've hit the button. What did you make about Steve Bruce today, then, with regards to his statement? I mean, he's obviously, he's obviously unhappy at the criticism being levelled at him. But what did you make of what I've just read out there?
Well, I have a thing about Steve Bruce and his press stuff anyway. It surprises me that an organisation like Newcastle, with the sort of money involved, that they don't give the guy some media training, because clearly he's had none. Because for me, every time he opens his mouth, he puts his foot in it. He'll say something positive, and then he'll say something totally that wipes it away. Like the other week when he was talking about, well, we're gonna win this because we're the Brighton game. We're going to win it because we want everybody's down with the COVID, and we're going to boost the whole area by doing something well. And he goes on to say things like, and that's what we're about, and we're doing it all for you. Well, what did he do for us? We just had an absolute disaster. And worse than that, one of my abiding memories of the Brighton game wasn't the fact that we got slaughtered, was the fact that when San Maxim got injured, I could hear the coach, I don't know if anybody else did, shouting from the touchline, run it off, run it off. Well, that's the sort of training that went out when I played 60 years ago, not now. And that's the kind of thing that worries me. In fact, Neil and Steve will know that my view of his training methods are that he's antiquated, is to put it mildly. And so today it was no surprise for me. Once he's in a corner, he's got to find somebody to blame, and the only people he can blame is the supporters for not liking what he's doing. And that's exactly what he's saying today. All right, so you don't like what I'm doing. Well, what am I going to do differently, etc.? You solve the problem, not him solve the problem. And I've just find that for a professional is very, very poor. Some simple media training surely would line him up to do the things, say the things he wants to say, without putting his foot in it. And it's just sad to hear somebody going in that way. But the lads are right. We can see what we see, and what we see is the evidence of the worst British manager in the Premier League's history. Got the worst percentage win rate, etc., etc., etc. You can go through the stats. There isn't one in his favour. And to start coming back and saying, well, I'm not too worried because you don't like it, etc., etc., is just naive. It's naive, and will make him get it worse. And you're right, Steve, as well. When you watch social media at the minute, even some of the gainsayers, some of the people who are rooting for him, have gone very quiet now because they're getting battered by people who are now got brave enough to fight back. There was one or two on Facebook, for example, who if you even try to criticize Bruce, would give you hell. They would call you all the names under the sun. Well, they're not doing it now because they're getting that themselves now, because people are realizing that he's a busted flush. He's had it, And as I say, blame the fans. There's only one route to that, and that is it's going to get worse. I mean, I see there's even a petition going around on Facebook at the moment to get him out. Well, you can't sink much lower than that. It's very sad. I'm a Newcastle fan, and I would love to see we do well with a Geordie manager, but it isn't going to be this Geordie manager, I'm afraid.
No, I mean, I've got to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't sign the petition. It's not going to help. I don't think. I mean, I understand people's frustrations. I do think some of these people do it just to get themselves in the headlines. Mitch, Bruce clearly not happy. We're clearly not happy. The big question is Mike Ashley happy?
That's a very good question. And somebody said to me through the week, when Mike Ashley starts turning up the games on a regular basis, something's going to happen. We've got to look at the situation we've got. He needs to be sure that his 300 million investment is protected. Because, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, the Bellanova group have reappeared magically. And they're still not offering what was on the table from the bid that is still on the table from PCPPAL. And he's not going to get that if we get relegated. He's not going to get that if things go south. So why is Ashley there on a regular basis? It's not just as simple as the ground being empty, because he can. I think he's keeping one eye on his investment. And then the next level for me is somebody's just rightly said in the comment on the screen. Once the manager starts having to go at the fans, things are going south. And it's not a good look. It's really not a good look. So, you know, this whole situation, I'm quite sure Ashley's keeping one very close eye on it, because he's got this ongoing court case. He's got an ongoing bid that he wants to. He has accepted. He wants it to go through, and he's got his money to protect. And I think Steve Bruce, if he's not mindful of that, then he bloody well should be. Mm-hmm. It's a really difficult situation, because, you know, I'll stand by the comments I've made previously about in the cup, for example. You can only be two's put in front of you, and you go on to the next round. And when they write your name on a cup, they don't say, but they nearly got knocked out in the fourth round. That doesn't happen, and that's quite true. But equally, as a fan base, you can't pull the wool over our eyes. We know what we are seeing. We're seeing a team that's had 3 shots on target in 3 Premier League games, and one of them was a penalty in the last minute. You know, you can't dress that up as something amazing or brilliant. You can't dress that up as tactical genius. We know when we're seeing players isolated. We know when we're seeing players played out of positions. We know when we see players that aren't happy. And then we've had Shelvey's comments this week as well about Rafa and lumping the ball forward. That was ridiculous, given the fact that we spent 70 minutes lumping the ball forward.
Yeah,
that was all we were doing. And just because you managed out of this is the frustrating thing with that man. We know he can score goals like that without thinking about it. But how do you motivate him to do it every week? Because frankly, he's standing there like Mr. Hollywood in a game against the League Two team who just looked hungrier, better organised, who wanted it more than us, who embarrassed her, really. Mm-hmm. And yet somehow we've got close to the kindest draw in the competition in the next round, and on we go. And that's great. But as a fan base, we still know what we're watching. And do not discredit us with the ability to understand what we are watching, because you're on dangerous ground, you're on thin ice doing that, and he's just walked into the middle of it. It's like when I used to live in Castle Leazes Halls, and my mates used to walk across Castle Leazes Pond in the winter, and we're walking across the ice, and you're waiting for somebody to go through it. That's what Steve Bruce is doing right now.
Yeah. Good question from Kieran Mann. We'll stick with this one. Can we scratch our heads for a minute to think of one player who's improved under Steve Bruce? Because I can't think of one. Steve, any player that you can think of? I can think of plenty that have got worse.
Only because he's had a bit of a run compared to last season would probably be Carl Darlow.
Bingo.
Probably on the back.
Bingo.
Sorry?
Bingo, you're spot on, Steve.
Yeah. And that's on the back of the fact that he played against Tottenham and put a performance in that reminded me very much of the Tim Krul one, where it was Tim Krul against Tottenham a couple of seasons ago. Well, more than a couple now. And on Sunday it was Carl Darlow against Tottenham for most of the game, and he was keeping it in. If Darlow hadn't had such a good game, that penalty incident wouldn't have mattered one iota. Not one iota. But probably because he's had a run of a few games at the start of the season, that's the only player I can think. But San Maxim's not a better player now than he was when he first arrived. Joe Linton certainly not, although people would say that he's again, last couple of games, he seems to have improved. But when you're improving from such a low base, quite frankly, anything is going to be an improvement. Is Almiron looking a better player than when he signed under Rafa? Certainly not. Is Andy Carroll looking a better player now that he's been given a second year? Absolutely not. Andy Carroll on Sunday made a cart horse look good. He was so far out of touch with the game. It was unbelievable. And if we're relying on someone who merely can throw elbows and win headers 35, 40, 45 yards away from goal and not in the penalty area, then fair enough. But it's not going to get anywhere, So no, Steve, that's probably the only player. And I don't think Hayden's a better player either. But somebody put up Hayden. No, he's not a better player than he was. He's probably just maybe he's do a little bit more on the odd occasion. But he's not. There's no a great big fanfare over Hayden that he's some sort of superstar. No, definitely not.
Now, George, is there anybody who's improved as far as you're concerned? I'm seeing Manquillo's name up a couple of times. I think Manquillo was half decent under Rafa, but to be fair, I can't think of one player that's improved.
Well, I'd have to go along with Steve and say not just Darlow, but all the goalkeepers. All the goalkeepers. I mean, if you think of the talent we've got in goalkeepers at the moment, Dubravka, Darlow, Woodman at Swansea, Gillespie now, even though he made a rick on the other night, he's still a good goalkeeper. And I gather we've got another one in the youth team who's going to start pressing them. Now that's Simon Smith, isn't it? That's nobody else. That's the goalkeeping coach. It's nothing to do with Steve Bruce. But it might also be to do with the fact that they're having to work ability hard because we've got no defence. We're getting pummeled game after game after game. So these lads have got to be on their toes, otherwise we wouldn't be in. I mean, let's face it. I was desperate not to see us get relegated last season. But if it hadn't been for Dubravka, we would have done. In my opinion, I mean, he time and again he was the difference between us scraping a draw or scraping a lucky win than getting a hiding. And Darlow on Sunday was just we should have been 5-0 down at half time if we're honest. So in terms of players that have improved, no, I can think of a few that have gone backwards though. Stan Maxim for me, first couple of games looked like a world beater. He's not a world beater now. And as I just said to you when you were talking about Bruce, that clip from Brighton where I could hear somebody saying, when he hurt his ankle, I could hear somebody saying, run it off. And the only way that kid could get treatment was to sit on his backside on the turf. Well, players aren't going to improve with things like that happening. It's a mess, complete mess.
There's a question there for you, George, on the screen. Is Bruce, in your opinion, the worst boss we've had in your time as a Newcastle fan?
Worst.
There's been a few bad ones,
been some real stumers. Yeah, I mean, I can remember the Gordon Lee years and Richard.
Say Charlie Mitten.
Well, that's being very personal because it was Charlie Mitten got rid of me, and you know that.
Well, that's just because my granddad threatened to knock him out as well. But that's another matter.
Well, yeah, Charlie. Well, the thing we're talking about, Bruce making speeches and to the press and all the rest of it. That used to be what Charlie Mitten used to do. When every opportunity he got to address people, he was up on his hind legs. And this afternoon, I was playing in a United 11 against, I think it was a team from Preston or somewhere like that. And after the match, at Hunters Moor, he got up on the veranda at the dressing room and started to tell the world his philosophy on football. And then he started to address the younger players like me in the team and saying, now, if you lads want to get in my team, you'll make yourselves famous. You get your names on the front of the paper, even if it's the news of the world. Fancy saying things like that to young people. Well, what I didn't know was that when it went quiet, my father went round the back and asked if he could speak to Mr. Mitten. And when Mitten came out, he told Mitten, he said, if he gets his name on the front of the news of the world, I'll come up to St. James's Park and I'll kick your arse all the way down to the central station. I don't think that did my career much good, but he meant it. But it's about this addressing the media. That you know, there's some that can do it and do it well. There's others that should just keep their mouth shut. And as I say, Bruce, every time he opens his mouth, he puts his foot in it for me. And I think probably the Gordon Lee years were close to being as bad as they are now, and with the fans being in real uproar, that's about as close as I can get, I think.
Okay, over to you, Mitch. Players that have improved under Steve Bruce, are there any?
The one that immediately sprung to my mind was the one that Steve mentioned, was Darlow. But that might just be because he's had opportunity.
Yeah,
I genuinely can't think of anybody else. And I'm talking about some of the youngsters here as well. The ones we've all seen either brought into the team or want to be brought into the team. Sean Longstaff. It's not that long ago, you know, was Man U talking about 30 million for Sean Longstaff. Would we get that for him now? I don't think so. Matty Longstaff, we've had this contract dispute, which later, you know, which you sign a new contract, and I think Bruce has tried to dress it up like he's tried to soothe the way and get it all sorted. But is that really the case? I'm not convinced. I'm certainly not convinced talking to his uncle, who still hasn't told us anything of substance, but he's told us lots of nothing as well, which speaks volumes too, you know. Still comes back to that original comment, don't believe everything that you read. And so, you know, I genuinely can't think of somebody who's got better. You know, even Lascelles, I see people criticising Lascelles, which I understand, because he doesn't look the same player at times.
Yeah.
But he's still a captain. He's still a leader. He should be. But is there a message being lost somewhere along the line? I don't know. But you know, you can count. You can count on the fingers of one hand the ones who've improved. I think you need all your fingers and your toes to see the ones that have gone backwards, and that's again not a good sign. And it comes back to have a go at the fans, have a go with our fan base. Steve will tell you, when we were doing this stuff to build the trust up, we got a real proper depth of understanding of the level of intelligence in our fan base. Yes, it may be daft at times, and it may be stupid at times, it may be crazy at times, and it may be lovable in all sorts of times, but it's also intelligent. It's football intelligent. Our fan base is football intelligence, and we know what we're watching on that pitch. And that doesn't lie, and that's what it comes back to. And yeah, Darlow, but that might just be because he's played a few more games. Okay,
Steve, let's go on to the cup game. It was a hard watch, it's got to be said. I'm going to sit on the fence and say Newport. Look, I know, you know, they've become cup specialists, and they've knocked a few teams out. Newcastle went down there, you know, according to Steve Bruce, with tactics. They fell behind to an early goal, struggled to get back into it. Looked poor across the pitch. It comes to something when Joe Linton really stands out as your best outfield player. Darlow, you know, again, outstanding. Gillespie, outstanding, keeping Newcastle in it. Then, obviously, apart from dropping the clanger, but you look at that game and you think Newcastle, you know, it was a potential banana skin. They got through it. They're into the next round. They're playing Brentford in the quarterfinals. Should we be happy about that? You know, should we? Are we being too critical, or you know, should we not be happy that we've progressed to the quarterfinals of the cup? What, you know, are we being too critical? I suppose is the question I'm asking, Steve.
No, we're not. Certainly not. I mean, yes, we're in the quarterfinal of the cup. We're all absolutely delighted to be in the quarterfinal of a cup. I think my first thought was, what's going to happen? What's going to happen in that round? Who we're going to get? You know, but looking at that game, I mean, we started off so slow, so lethargic. We started off defending again on my 18-yard box, and he's saying he wants a more dynamic, he wants a more quicker team. Well, you don't get it from defending and everybody getting behind the ball and then just standing. You've got to attack the ball. I don't see central defenders when the ball's coming. I don't see them charging in for a header. I see them standing off, waiting for the ball. I see fullbacks standing, waiting for it, not going into challenge. You look back on that game that we had, if you remember, against Leicester, where there was that 8, 9, 10, 12 tackles that were put in, full thud and blunder tackling. But we're not seeing anything. We're seeing players standing off going, I'm not interested in this. It was announced after the game that apparently they all ended up having to have a cold shower. I tell you what, I looked at it, I thought, when I heard that, I thought some of them needed to get in a cold shower before the game to wake themselves up, quite frankly, because it wasn't until the last 10 minutes that we actually started to move the ball around, which was probably because Newport County had ran out of steam by then. You know, mentally they were shocked because they'd been hanging on to a 1-0 and they weren't getting past the goalkeeper with anything. They'd had that early goal. But you just look at the performances right across the pitch. We're not determined enough. We're not getting our foot into the challenges in the right places. We're not hitting teams in the right way. We're not playing with the passion that you would expect from a Premier League team, from players that would be wanting to prove themselves. We can use the excuse that there's no crowd, but we were told only a couple of weeks ago by Bruce that he thought some of these players were benefiting from not having a crowd in front of them and the pressure that was bearing on them. And now we're seeing completely the opposite, because there's players there that they're just cruising, absolutely cruising. I mentioned Andy Carroll there before. The challenges, he's picking up the ball on the halfway line, and he's laying the ball off, and we get a lovely run from Murphy, or a lovely run from Richie, somebody like that, and then the cross comes over, and you're expecting Andy Carroll to be on the end of it, and Andy Carroll's barely crossing the midfield area. Is his fitness that bad that once he lays the ball off, he can only stand, or he can only walk the next sort of 20, 25 yards? He's not busting a gut, and when you do see him trying to bust a gut, I mean, no disrespect, but it's like watching an old man trying to run for a bus, you know? Never ever going to catch it, because you know he's not even going to get to the point where the doors are going to get shut in his face. The bus is away and it's past the lights and probably at the next stop by the time he catches it, you know? It's just embarrassing. I just can't understand when Bruce comes out with the statements that he did come out, and then you watch his performances, none of it knits together. None of what he says is actually what I'm saying. And, you know, Newport gave us a game, no question that they gave us a game. And did they deserve to win? Probably on performance, on 70 minutes, yes. And when it come to the penalties, you know, they got done. And that's football, and we'll move on, and we're into the next round, and we've got a tough tie against a very, very good Brentford team, who put out Premiership team on Thursday night, you know. So it's not an easy route into the semi-final, and everybody's sitting there praying that we're going to get Stoke, you know. Quite the opposite, you know. We're sitting there thinking, what sort of performance are we going to be able to put in? Because I'm not seeing anything that fills us with the excitement or with anything other than trepidation, quite frankly.
George, it probably helps us, doesn't it, that this game isn't going to be played now until December. So a lot can change in football between now and December.
It would be nice if a lot did change, Steve. You're absolutely right. But the other night was just desperate to watch. I mean, you've been talking about Shelvey and what he'd had to say today. Until just before he scored the goal, I was sitting here thinking, why is he taking Shelvey off? He just drifted around the place. Sometimes he was further back than the centre-backs were. And then the next thing, he was on the halfway line, but not doing anything really dangerous until he scored the goal, which was great, I admit. But it was so turgid. It wasn't really nice to watch. And so, yes, it would be nice to think things would change, but I'm not sure what will in the time that we've got between now and December, because it would take a whole change in personnel on the field and off the field to make any real difference at all. Because while people are saying, well, Brentford are going to be up to their next in a championship challenge, well, the way we are going, we might be up to our next in a relegation battle by Christmas, you know. And I hope not, because I'm a Newcastle fan, but I'm afraid the way we're going at the moment and the comments that the manager's making or the coach, it's not very positive for me. The draw is excellent. I mean, that's another thing about Bruce. I think I commented on Twitter the other night. If you look at his record, the one positive thing about his record, he's had years of good luck in cups. And he's got good cup runs with some very modest teams and poor teams. The downside to that is a couple of them got relegated at the same time as they won the cup.
All of them did.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of thing. So, but he does have
that quote on screen now. All being relegated.
Yeah, he does have that look in the cup, and you can say, in terms of the draw, we got lucky. It had to be Brentford or Stoke. We didn't want any of the others, did we? Nobody would be clapping their hands if we'd got any of the others, but Stoke or Brentford was a good draw, and that's what we've got. So, but I'd like to think things would change, but I'm doubtful if we can, Steve, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Quarter-final again, Mitch. I mean, people forget Rafa got us to this stage himself, of course. I think it was Hull we ended up getting drawn against, and we went out rather comprehensively down at Hull. But do you think this time scale between now and the quarter-final does us a favour? Because, it is exciting to be in the quarter-final, despite the fact we can't actually go and see it at the minute.
Makes a massive difference because you don't know where they're going to be by that time. You've got to remember the Championship because we've been there, it's a horrible division where the games come thick and fast, where you can pick up injuries left, right, and centre. You rely on your squad, and again, by nature, Championship squads tend not to be deep. Yeah, I've seen that as well, Dan.
We'll come back, George.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. The games come thick and fast. You can pick up injuries. We could be playing like a team with 3 or 4 different players in the starting lineup come the middle of December. And equally, we could be decimated with all sorts of injuries because we know what our injury record's like. So it could be a blessing, it could be a curse. Personally, I would rather it was in the next couple of weeks, but it isn't. That's the way they've done it. So yeah, it could help with a lot. But going back to Bruce with this whole record in the cup and I know I had a lad today, funny enough. One of the lads who gets out with me is a lad called Rob, who's a Chelsea fan. Stu who was on the show last night knows very well. And Rob was trying to tell us tonight that Bruce is a great manager because he's promoted so many clubs from the Championship. And I'm like, yeah, because he's relegated them all there first. It's a double-edged sword. And that's the problem. It's really... I love the fact we're in the quarter-final of the cup because it's something we've not even thought about for ages. And I tweeted this probably when the 2 draws were made for the 2 rounds, blink and we're in the quarterfinals, and we are. And yeah, it hasn't been a blink. And in fact, the game against Newport was far from a blink. But we are, and we're there. And I stand by what I said because you've got to. Nobody rates on the cup. Nearly got knocked out in penalties in the 4th round because nobody will ever talk about that. If we happen to do the ridiculous and win it, that's never going to be talked about again. They'll be talking about as the first domestic trophy since 1955.
Yeah,
and actually quite rightly so. But this is the problem. This is the absolute ridiculous situation that we're in. Because again, we know what we see with our eyes. We know what we're seeing on the pitch, in the Premier League and in the cups. We should have watched that game and we came up against a team that was organised and fit and hungry and keen and just for about 75 minutes blew us out of the water. And that's a League 2 team. And that's horrible.
Yeah, it is. Raimondo, good to have you on, mate. He says the retro show last night was tremendous. Thanks, mate. Yeah, we got a picture sent in by a good friend of the show as well, Steve Wilkinson. He was for years involved with Newcastle United's disability section of supporters, and that's 1998, Wembley Way, with Sir John Hall. And he says when he was speaking to him before the photograph was taken, he said, "This is what I was promising. Being in the top 6 and being in the top 10 in Europe." And Steve says, "Where's it all gone wrong?" But great memories from that time, Steve. Thanks for sharing that photograph. Much appreciated, mate, and hope you're doing well under these testing times. Steve Hasty, a lot of talk on the chat, as I'm sure you've seen the comments that I'm putting up there about Shelvey. I'm going to come to them in a second. I'm going to give the sponsors a shout out first. Big shout out to Darren Baldwin Funerals. Thanks for sponsoring this month, and a big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend in the Tune, and Darren Baldwin as well. Anybody wants to contact him, hopefully you won't have to contact him over the next weekend or so, but that's his number, 01914782730. Darren, thank you very much for sponsoring us, and don't forget, guys, if you're out and about and you missed the YouTube show, get yourself onto iTunes or Spotify and search NUFC Matters. But yeah, Steve, a lot of people talking about Shelvey on the chat. What's your view on Shelvey? Because he's come out this week. Neil's already mentioned it. He's come out this week and actually, from his point of view, defended Steve Bruce and had a pop at Rafa. No surprise there. Rafa dropped him. Didn't want him anywhere near the first team squad. Steve Bruce has brought him back in. On occasions has made him captain of the team and more or less given him free rein to do sweet FA in the middle.
Yeah, because of the style of football that Bruce wants to play, where he has a flat back four who are defending so deep to allow Shelvey to play even deeper at times. I mean, he's saying a flat back four. He's virtually part of the five at times. He's there right in front, within 5 yards of the back four, picking the ball up and pinging these passes. He's not running with the ball. He's not creating anything. He's not playing nice little 1-2s, and he's not setting up play, and he's not distributing it in the manner that you would expect a top central midfield player to do. He's not doing it 20, 25, 30, 35 yards further forward, where we're going to actually create something from those 1-2s or from those slide rule passes that he's got in his locker. Instead, what we're doing is we're hitting ridiculous long balls into corners, and sometimes not even into corners, just into the goalkeeper's hands, as we saw at Newport. So Shelvey needs to question himself on his performances. It shouldn't be us that's questioning Shelvey's performances. It should be Shelvey himself who's looking at his performances and thinking, for 70 grand a week, that's not good enough. And if Shelvey does get dropped, he's only got himself to blame, quite frankly. Now, would I play him? What system am I going to play without him? Am I then going to have Hayden playing in exactly the same role, deep alongside Hendrick? Is that all? That's because that's basically the only option I've got. Because I don't think playing Sean Longstaff there is going to make us any more dynamic. Sean Longstaff he's playing at the top of the midfield line, behind the front two. Maybe we might get to maybe Sean can play those slide rule passes if you want to look for them. But the whole setup is just slow and lethargic. Almiron doesn't run down the line anymore. Almiron has invented this way of playing football sideways, running sideways. David Batty used to get slagged off for passing the ball sideways. Almiron runs sideways with the ball now. That's something that he didn't have in his locker when he was playing for Rafa in that half season, because when he came into the squad, he looked as though he was going to bring something exciting and special. It's a conundrum. What do I do? Who do I bring in his place? What sort of style am I going to be playing to be able to bring someone in to perform better? I'm not getting the $1.5 million, £2 million a year to pick Steve Bruce's team or to provide him with the tactics. I tell you what, there's enough people out there that could do it for like a couple of quid a year. To be perfectly honest, because we see what's going on. It's not a Shelvey problem. It's it's a 9-10 players on the pitch problem that we have, fitting them into a style of football that he still hasn't developed, and he's going to use that excuse of Rafa and in the defensive formation of a 5-man. I didn't think Rafa at times played. I think we played that Man City game where we sat back and we had 21% of the possession. And stole a result. But apart from that, we watched it. I was sitting next to George. We watched that game and we were fascinated by that. That it was a duel not between the two teams, but it was a duel between Guardiola and Rafa. And Rafa had set his team up to say to Guardiola, right, you show me how you can break us down. You show me how you can beat me. This became a Real Madrid-Barcelona sort of affair where Rafa set his stall out and said, right, let's see how good you are at being able to break a team down. But when we did do things like that, when Rafa did put it, I never ever saw his 5 as a defensive 5. I saw a defensive 3 with 2 wing backs that moved forward, that attacked. Yedlin was outstanding during the Rafa time, where he was bombing up and down that right wing. Paul Dummett, when he was part of a 3 or when he was part of a 5 and he was playing out wide as a left fullback or a left wing back, probably better suited as a left fullback than a wing back, by the way. But he had the strength and ability and the speed to be able to get back into position and pass a ball as well. Now you're not getting that, and this is the problem. I don't think Bruce has got it in his locker to even decide what the formation is with this particular squad, to be perfectly honest. And just pointing the finger at Shelvey and saying, would you drop him or would you not? There's probably it needs a complete and utter sort of surgery on how they're actually going to perform, not just who's going to do the performance, but getting them to play faster, getting them to move, getting the transition correct, getting it happening in the right places on the pitch, and pushing Shelvey 25, 30 yards forward and not having them pick up the ball to give Fernandez an easy game or give Lascelles an easy game, because that's all they have to do. They're not even winning the ball sometimes. They just, when the ball comes to them, they just have to play it off to him, because that's probably the only outlet ball that's available, because he's there taking the ball off them.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, the penalty situation at Newport midweek told me a lot. When the camera zoomed to Steve Bruce, he was standing on the sidelines twiddling his thumbs, while Steve Agnew was on the pitch trying to cajole the players and get them together to see who wanted to take a penalty. Newport were all in a huddle, everyone together, the manager with the team, and basically saying, this is who's taking it, who wants one, this. Steve Bruce was standing on the sidelines. He left it to Steve Agnew. That tells you all you need to know. Before we come to you, George, a lot of people asking about the T-shirts. Thank you to Q-Tech who sent the T-shirts out. I think they've sent one to Mitch as well. I think they're sending one to Steve. They're doing T-shirts for people involved in the show, which is nice. But I think they're going to knock some up to sell. So we should have news on that next week. Somebody also asking if the Christmas do is going ahead. Is the tickets left? Yes, we are doing a Christmas do in aid of the food bank. Friday the 4th of December, all being well with COVID, of course. Tyneside Irish Centre. Lee Clark will be doing a Q&A with myself. There'll be a raffle, there'll be an auction, there'll be a lot of the guys there from the show. Steve Hasty will be there. Liam Kennedy's coming along from the Shields Gazette. A few of the lads, few of the lasses will be coming along. It'll be a great night. It's 12 quid a ticket. You can get them from www.newcastlelegends.com. A lot of people asking as well about Alan Saint-Maximin. We're led to believe he could be fit and make a return tomorrow. So fingers crossed for that. So yeah, George Shelvey, he's a bit of an enigma. I've got to be honest, not my favourite player whatsoever. I didn't rate him when he came to the club. He's been okay in fits and starts. He can pull off a bit of magic like he did the other night, but he's not, for me, what we should have been aspiring to under Rafa, he didn't fit the bill. Now we're under Steve Bruce. He's probably perfect for Steve Bruce. He's a player's player and all of this. Like, he probably goes down the pub and has a pint with Brucey, but he's part of the problem, I think, for me, George.
Well, he is. I mean, as I just said to you before, just before he scored that goal, I was sitting here thinking, get off, take him off, for goodness sake. He's a luxury we can't afford. Because there were times he was deeper than the centre-backs in that match. And you wonder, well, what's he doing back there? How is he going to affect the game from that sort of depth, and he wasn't affecting the game. And then he came up with this superb goal. You can't take that away from him. But even then, over the 90 minutes, if you look at it dispassionately, he didn't contribute another jot to the game, really. Not in the way you'd expect somebody with his experience to do. I suppose I'm slightly biased because on 2 occasions, one of them thanks to you and one of them thanks to Steve Hasty, I was able to hear Rafa talking about the guy. And the Brighton game when Chris Hughton in the championship, when Chris Hughton came, and Chris Hughton was saying to Rafa, well, what's John Joe doing? And Rafa's response was, and Steve will correct us if I'm wrong, well, it's up to him at the end of the day. He just won't do what he's told. And that's right. And that was the short answer. I thought, well, that's hitting it between the eyes. There's no two ways about that. And then there was the training situation. The lads are training and all the rest of it. And Rafa's saying, well, I'll get 20 or 30 20-meter runs out of him, or I'll get 10 40-meter runs out of him. I'll be lucky if I get 2 out of Shelvey.
Yeah.
And that's always been the situation. The first season he was here, he was important because he did something different for the team when he came. But since then, he's just gone backwards for me. At one stage, had he played to his potential, I think Rafa would have got him back in the England squad, but he didn't. And that was the end of that as far as I was concerned. So he contributed very little for me. Yes, he got a fantastic goal, but I just feel he's past his sell-by date in many ways, to be perfectly honest.
No, I agree, and I think teams like Liverpool don't get rid of good players, and Liverpool showed him the door. Swansea showed him the door. Newcastle, as always, lapping up substandard players who essentially will that'll do for us kind of thing, and we've been doing it for years. We've done it for years. Unfortunately, that's just our luck. Mitch, Shelvey, tell us a little bit about your feelings on John Joe.
I get frustrated at the moment hearing people use the word quarterback about him, because you're talking about a quarterback role that even in American football is outdated. You're talking about a quarterback who's John Elway. You're talking about a quarterback who is Joe Namath. You're not talking about a quarterback who is Patrick Mahomes. You're not talking about a quarterback who is Lamar, Deshaun Jackson, Deshaun Watson. Sorry, you're not talking about these new quarterbacks, because that game's moved on. And you know what? So is ours.
Yeah.
And everybody's worked out what a quarterback does. And that's why these new breed in American football, these new breed of mobile, aggressive quarterbacks who've got everything, they're almost additional running backs who can pass the ball. They do everything. They run, they block, they do trick plays, and they can still put a 30, 40, 50-yard bomb into a wide receiver on his numbers and get a touchdown. They've had to evolve because people have worked them out. You can't have a quarterback who stands in the pocket and just passes. If you look in the NFL at the moment, the teams who play with a quarterback in the pocket like that now are getting obliterated. You need a quarterback that does something different. Same in football, same in our game. The quarterback role has been worked out. It's been totally sussed, and you can't play it anymore. Why? Because people know how they work, how to play them, how to pressure them, how to get them out of possession, how to make them kick I'll leave Russell Watson out of it because I'm a Mahomes guy all the way. They know how it works, so it's easy to defend against, or it's easier to defend against. And I think Newport showed that. They knew for 70 minutes, they had that under control. They knew what it was going to do. They knew what was going to happen. They knew where the balls were going. And he had them set up the play to work that out.
Yeah.
Not rocket science. Not rocket science. Good organisation, good fitness, good intensity. At the end of the day, they ran out of steam, and that's simply because they're a League Two team.
Yeah.
If that was a Premier League team, they'd have seen that game out quite easily. So the role that Shelvey wants to play, Mr. Hollywood, doesn't exist anymore. It can't, and he has to show that he can adapt and evolve, and I'm convinced he can.
Yeah, you're right, mate. You're right. Well, Shelvey's an enigma. It's always going to create debate. A lot of people talking about that. Last hour of the show to go, so still plenty to talk about. Anything you want to suggest, please do it in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're a first-time viewer. I know we always get first-timers on each night. A lot of people saying some very nice things about us, which is great. But if you subscribe to the channel, it's free. Please also hit the thumb. If you like the video, it does help us with the algorithms and gets us a little bit more publicity. Both of those things are free. If you're feeling generous and want to chip in a little donation, click the join button and you can donate a little bit to the cause, because obviously we all give up our time for free. Steve, we were talking a little bit about this off air. Dan Barlaser, gone. Not on loan, as we all expected, but gone permanently. And Martin Nesbitt, who does the worldwide show and will be on our live match coverage for Burnley tomorrow, has basically said that he's really upset about that. He didn't want to see him go. We're letting young local talent go. What's your take on Barlaser going to Rotherham?
All the talk at the start of the season was he was going to be part of the squad. He was going to be there. He was thereabouts. You know, they were having a really good look at him. This was sort of somebody that was probably seen as the cover for Matty in a way. Whether or not Matty staying has meant that Barlaser has decided to leave because he felt as though he was going to be behind Matty in the squad. I'm not too sure, but you know, all the conversation in the press right the way through the very, very short and close season, and then the start of the run-up to the season was that the lad was in with a chance of getting a squad number and being part of the 25. Then all of a sudden, like you say, 250,000 seems like a stick. I know that clubs are struggling. I know that there's allegedly a 50% sell-on clause that's been put in. But even then, we're so desperate for £250,000 that we've let him go, you know, somebody that they obviously rated very, very highly. And I'm fascinated that, again, we're letting young talent slip away. It makes you wonder what we bother having an academy for, to be quite honest, because there's so few players that make the grade. You remember the time when Keegan got rid of the reserve team, and I think he did it in very much of a bit of a spat because they couldn't play the reserve games at St James's Park anymore, and he wanted to have the reserve team having the experience and being used to the ground and used to the pitch and the whole ambience and situation, so that when they did, if they got called in, they would feel as though they were, you know, they'd already experienced that and they knew what was going on and they knew the dimensions and all that. But really, I mean, I think the problem you've got is the youth team football hasn't started yet. The academy football hasn't started yet, and it doesn't look like there's going to be reserve team games either. And maybe his Barlaser and his agent have just said, you know what, you're not going to be kicking a ball. You're just going to be turning up for training, and that's about it. And you're not going to get a run out, and you're going to get felt on your backside if you do manage to get into the first team squad. And maybe Bruce has told him that as well, and maybe that shaped his decision to go, because you know somebody somewhere has told him that he's not wanted. Otherwise, he would have probably stayed, you know, a young lad, unless he's so desperate for first team football and the opportunity. And hey, good luck to the lad. He might shine at Rotherham, and he's going to be playing in the Championship, and he might be absolutely perfectly suited to that, and he might turn into a really good player. And we might see performances from him, and he moves on to a bigger club in the intervening years, and the club gets something back. But I just think it's a backward step when you've got someone who's been at the club since 9-year-old, all the way through the academy age groups, you know, then gets a contract, and like it's almost like cricket, isn't it? You get a central contract, you're part of the squad, you're part of the youth setup, you work your way through, and then they basically just hit a brick wall. They just don't get the options, they don't get the opportunities, and then they move on. And like I say, it's not like you've got an academy that is generating players that you're going to be selling, like Chelsea, for example, selling for 15, 20, 30, 40 million quid. These are players that we're selling for 250,000. That in itself, says so much about the academy setup that we have.
Yeah, of course it does. George, disappointing, isn't it, when you see a youngster go? It's not the first one to leave these shores, and sometimes it does come back to bite you back on the backside, like Alan Shearer did.
Well, I suspect this one might as well, because of what I seen of Barlaser at Barnsley last year, he looked good. I was pleased he was coming back, and I thought, well, he might have a real chance. And to be frank, what I seen of him in the pre-season, the odd games he got, he looked to me as equally as good as the Longstaffs on those games. And to let him go for £250,000, as Steve says, I would really that desperate? I would really need £250,000 that bad. Plus, somebody has already been said, from 9-year-old to where he is now has been bread and butter for the club. To let them go in that way, what does that say to the other ones? Some of the other ones that's been around. What does it say to the young ones that are watching this happen, saying, well, do I really want to go to Newcastle? Why don't I go somewhere else? There's a couple of academies down the road that might suit us better than this one, because it sends a message, and the message to young players is why go there. I mean, it could be that young players will go to the academy that the Williamson and Ritchie and them are running with Newcastle Bentfield, because it's getting a hell of a reputation in Wall's End for what they're doing with the kids there to provide an avenue into the game. But it's not a good message when you've got somebody that's been there that long, and they go for £250,000. It was virtually a song as far as I'm concerned, and a bit disappointing, because I did like the kid, what I saw of him, but because we didn't see much of him at the high level, at the Premiership level, and you won't see much until they've had 2 or 3 games. I mean, Longstaff took a while to get in, and the more games he got, the better he looked. His injury is what set him back, in my view. But Barlaser has never even had that opportunity, and I think that's quite sad, really.
Yeah, disappointing, isn't it, Mitch, to see a young lad leave? I've got to be honest. I thought he would have made the grade at Newcastle, but clearly hasn't had the opportunities. And maybe, as some people are suggesting, maybe he just doesn't fancy playing for Steve Bruce.
Maybe he doesn't, or maybe, like you said, maybe his agent said, "Look, guaranteed first team play in the Championship, and on you go." It's really frustrating. I mean, I'll give you like a personal opinion on the whole academy setup and how it works. And my dad will back us up on this one. Our Joss, when we lived in Morpeth, played for Morpeth, and that effectively was in a league that fed into the Newcastle Academy. And then before we came out here, we moved out to the Durham Dales, and just started playing for Anfield Plain. And that fed into Sunderland's academy, and just started playing games that were effectively academy qualifiers to go into Sunderland's academy. And I have to say, hand on heart, if he'd gone into either of the 2 academies, I know where I would rather he'd have gone. It wouldn't have been Newcastle.
Yeah.
It was. I say that through gritted teeth and with a broken heart. But that setup was far better, far more professional, had an eye on the youngsters, knew what all the youngsters were doing, knew what all the youngsters could become, had an eye on that talent. Before they'd even had an assessment game, before they'd done a trial game, they knew who they were talking to. Good God, one of the coaches knew who I was. Ridiculous. You're the lad that set up the trust, aren't you? I'm like, hold on. and I never met the bloke in my life.
Yeah.
And they had that whole structure set up to go to develop and nurture and take a player and take them on. Whereas our academy just seemed haphazard. They'd turn up when they liked at the games that Josh was playing for Morpeth at various parts of the northeast, often up by the race course and what have you. And there'd be whispers and corners and what have you. But, you know, it just wasn't right. You know, seeing a comment on the screen again about Sorensen, somebody who came in with amazing reports and reviews, probably has a stronger Geordie accent than all of us put together. And what's happened? He's dwindled at Carlisle. He's now off to, I think, the second division Dutch team, where hopefully he's going to develop and grow. But we just don't seem able to develop players. You know, we've got an academy that produces players, but then they get to a point and they just level off and they disappear. And that's really sad. That's really sad, and it's frustrating as well. And it'll be frustrating for the players. It'll be frustrating for the families of the players. Can I tell you how frustrating it was for me to sit and talk to one of the coaches at Anfield playing about Joss and saying, look, he's got a chance to go into Sunderland's academy, and how far does that stick in my throat? You know.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I've heard that story many times.
And his, for that matter, turning up with bloody training at Sunderland's training grounds, wearing a Newcastle shirt and Newcastle socks and shin pads, doing everything he could to wear black and white to just pay people off. You know, but frustrating as anything.
Yeah, we've got to talk next about the takeover. We haven't had a takeover chat for a while, lads, but it's back on the agenda, and we've got to talk about it. We'll be doing the fans a disservice if we didn't speak about it. And Steve Bellegraph Nova back in the headlines, back talking about taking over Newcastle United. What was your view on that today?
It's slow news day, isn't it? Absolute slow news day. I mean, there's been nothing happening, has there? So we've ended up with another ridiculous story coming out. It's actually the same old story, isn't it? Only now we've got alleged quotes from the woman, from the young girl who's supposed to run part of the organisation. I know she got into a deep and meaningful chat with whoever was asking her the questions regarding how big the company was. And, you know, I mean, it was only a fortnight ago we're hearing they were being investigated by the Singapore Stock Exchange. And now all of a sudden she's mouthing off and she's using it as a vehicle to try and explain herself out of it by saying they're still interested in Newcastle. And some of the allegations that were made against them was that they don't have 28,000 people working for them, as they stated they did, because they're such a massive multinational company. And she said, well, we're actually an internet company, but so in theory or in practice, all the companies that we're linked to, all those people work for us and stuff like that. And you're just laughing your head out. You're just thinking, how weird, man, pet. You know, give your head a shake. You know, we're not going to fault on it. But it's yet another story. It's the same regurgitated stuff. I'm even seeing some journalists backtracking on you know what they've said in the past about them, and one or two who have you know fallen in line and see it for what it is. One or two are now saying, oh, now that they've spoken and we haven't heard from elsewhere, maybe there is something in it. Somebody asked me on Twitter earlier, and I think it was a private message, and I just said, look, you know, is it a coincidence that you know these stories come out? Why did it come out? You know, it's no longer self-publicity, is it? It's no longer trying to promote your own company. They're trying to dig themselves out of somewhere, as far as I can see. That's a good one. Maybe that's true. Maybe, you know, we haven't seen the photograph with her with Obama yet. Well, we have with Obama. We haven't seen her with with Trump yet. Maybe he's said that's because he's got COVID. I don't know. Maybe he's just going to pull one out of a hat and show us a photograph of him, and maybe they'll use that as the excuse for the deal not carrying on. God knows what. So, but Steve, you know what? This takeover will happen when everything's sorted. There's obviously things. We're hoping that there's things still going on behind the scenes. Everything's very, very quiet. And from the PIF, PCP angle. We've got the court case at the end of October that involves FIFA. We were never ever really hanging our hat on that decision, but that's just another notch, if you like, that shows that there is corruption all over the sport and all over football, and it doesn't shine the BN Sports Qatar angle in a very good light, but they've never been in a very good light anyway.
Yeah. But James is asking how can a couple of corrupt employees of the Premier League stop a takeover? We don't know. Obviously, that's your words, James, not ours. But obviously, from our perspective, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of things which don't make sense, and this is the whole point, James, of taking legal action. The legal action will mean that everything, and I mean everything, that has been discussed, gone backwards and forwards in emails, everything will all come out in the wash. And that is what I suppose PIF are banking on, essentially, that eventually there will be their day in court when all of this has to come out. And the Premier League won't want the dirty laundry washed in public. And that's right, isn't it, Steve?
Absolutely. And you look at, there was a story in the press earlier in the week when we were talking about the finances of the Premier League and about the COVID world that we're in and how all the clubs in the lower leagues are struggling. And all of a sudden there was a story that said that the EFL were talking to Saudi officials and people from Saudi about putting investment in. And I thought, you know what, we're going to see that. And then we're going to see something from Richard Keys and we're going to see something from BN Sports, and we're going to start to have comments from them again, because that's something that they don't want. They don't want those types of stories coming out. Still keeping the link, still the mention of Saudi, because as far as they're concerned, they want the whole thing to be dead and not talked about it anymore. And if they get the slightest sniff or the slightest bit of wind that there's something going on, that there's the possibility of a Saudi involvement in the Premier League, which could go against them in some way, shape or form in the future, they'll do everything in their power to change the story, change the dimension, and take the subject matter into a different tack and make it about themselves, and make the Newcastle fans the story, because of the angst that we've now got potentially another buyer. It'll be next week. It'll be Morris is still involved, or he still wants to, or there'll be the Peter Kenyans. That'll suddenly pop into the frame again. It's bound to, and that's the nature of the way that the media and certain people in media are playing Newcastle fans constantly on this, Steve.
Yeah, George, it's something we haven't spoken to you about yet. The takeover. What's been your views on the constant on-off rumours, stories, outbursts, tantrums, whatever you want to call it, over the last 6-7 months? It's been frustrating, hasn't it, during lockdown to have this played out in public?
I've helped with two of the things that you lads have organised over the last few years. The Canadian one, the Matthew Southern one, with J. Robson French. They wanted to meet everybody, so I was able to facilitate the meeting the Lord Lieutenant, the Vice Chancellor of the University. They were actually going to come back and meet the Chancellor of the University if they got the chance, but they never got that far because it died the death once they'd met Ashley, and things at Gateshead Council just went pear-shaped. So it has, in that sense, it has been very, very frustrating. Some of the interesting things for me is that having spent 15 years working in Whitehall in various positions, voluntary positions as chairman of Central Probation Council, that sort of thing, and meeting some of these lawyers that I now see their names flashing across the screen as being involved in these sort of things. For example, people were saying those lawyers have took this down off their Facebook page. Does that mean they're not interested? Well, it means quite the opposite, because they're very competitive and they don't want other people thinking that's all the bloody work they've got. You know, they're after all sorts of work, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested in Newcastle United. For me, it means quite the opposite. But extremely frustrating, and the length of time is indefensible. The one thing I hope would happen, and I'm sorry Ian's not here tonight, I was hoping that somebody would get Masters and the Premier League back into Parliament before a select committee, because if a select committee takes control of things, they can actually take control of your business if they want to. And it would have been nice if somebody said, well, how do you do that? Why do you do that? Well, we think you should do something different. And it might have been very embarrassing to hear some of the answers, or worse, no answers at all, just no comment, because I think that's what might have happened. So yes, it's been terribly frustrating. The other side of it is this new group, when they came on the scene, because I saw there was a kind of link to Singapore, I got very excited, because for the past 50 years, I've spent 50 years working as a consultant with Singaporean government, with the universities, with the major shipbuilders out there and the major offshore yards. And I know there's a very warm feel for Newcastle United in Singapore. I mean, I went to last time I was out there, I went to a dinner that was put on for the people from the university by the alumni out in Singapore. And it was being held by a guy who had a dental and medical degree from Newcastle. And do you know what they call his clinic? The Newcastle Clinic. And his logo on top of his headed notepaper was a gold image of the Tyne Bridge. You you couldn't get much more close than that. And everywhere you went, I mean, I can remember walking through one of the shipyards, the Keppel shipyard, and people were sticking their heads out of holes in the side of ships and offshore rigs and saying, "How's this done? What's the team do? Why the team doing this?" Talking professionally was nearly impossible, because they just wanted to talk about Newcastle United. So obviously, when I saw these were from Singapore, I thought, well, wow, that would be wonderful if it was genuine. But then I watched what they were saying. Now, in all the negotiations I've had, whether it be government, university, shipyards, or universities, the one thing they never did was talk about the deal till it was over. They never said, we're doing this, we're going to do that, we're not going to do this. Nah, they talked about it. This is what we've done. This is what we're going to do. Never talked about it in between while the negotiations were going on. I mean, people in this part of the world probably don't realise we qualify, Newcastle University, we qualify more naval architects and marine engineers in Singapore now than we do at Newcastle, because we run our courses out there. And why do we run our courses out there? They had a president, a former prime minister called Lee Kuan Yew, who was a very hard man, and he wanted his naval architects and marine engineers to have what he called the Newcastle experience. So while other universities were trying to sell him a franchise, he came to us and said, I want you to do this for us, for our young people, and want you to come to Singapore and do it for us. So we hired people, we trained them at Newcastle, and then they went out to Singapore to teach our courses. And with online stuff and all the rest of it, they take the same exams, they take everything else, the same coursework. And that's the kind of feel. And that was Lee Kuan Yew saying, I want our students to have the Newcastle experience. And just across the causeway from Singapore to Malaysia, there's now NewMed. There's a 400-place medical school being built. And the entrance to it, you know, the big King's Gate up from the Haymarket, when you look at our university, there's the huge King Edward's Gate. Well, the NewMed in Malaysia, first thing that hits you, you're driving through the dense jungle on these brand new roads, you turn a corner and there's King's Gate in front of you. They built a replica of the gate out there in Malaysia. And And all I'm trying to say is the feeling out there is so warm towards this part of the world, and it's existed a long time. People also forget that they've got some of the most modern and productive shipyards and offshore yards in the world. Well, those were started off by people from Swan Hunters going out and showing them how to do it after the war. And it was Lee Kuan Yew who said, I want Newcastle experience in that as well. And throughout there's been that warm feeling. He used to select the people, some of the students that came to us in my department when I was selector in naval architecture. And sometimes we'd get people turn up that weren't the people we expected. And they'd say, well, that can't happen because it's got to be who we've selected. And Lee Kuan Yew would come on the phone. Oh, Mr. Mitchell, you've got to take them. And I'd say, well, I don't have to do anything. Oh, well, I'll speak to the Vice Chancellor. I say, well, no, as admissions tutor, not even the Vice Chancellor can make me take anybody that I don't want to take. But then he would say something like, oh, how are the lads? They want the Newcastle experience and all that sort of thing. And try and butter me up. And he used to win. He used to win. Of course, I wouldn't send kids back to Singapore. I'd find a place for them. But there's that sort of warmth towards the place and to Newcastle United. So when I saw these people coming, I thought, this could be good. This could be great. This could be just what we need. But then I saw what they were doing, shouting their mouths off and all the rest of it. That's not how they do business in Singapore. They don't talk about it until the deal's done, until the deed's done. In fact, we'd signed agreements with them to run the courses in naval architecture, the first ones that were run, and not even the Vice Chancellor of the university knew about it till we came home and told them. Yeah, they didn't want it public. So when I saw these people, what they were saying, I thought, nah, this is a con. This is just nonsense. It isn't. But it's sad because, as I say, that's a part of the world where there's a really warm feeling for Newcastle, the region, and Newcastle United.
Yeah.
So it's sad from my point of view.
Neil, it's it just looks like a bit of a publicity stunt on behalf of the BBC, doesn't it? Let's just wind the Newcastle fans up again, remind them there's a takeover still in the offing, and I didn't buy much into that the day, to be perfectly honest.
I don't even think it's that. I think the only people this is still serving is Bellanova Group.
Yeah,
it's the only people that this is still serving. Actually, little side note to back up something your dad was saying about the warmth for Newcastle across this region and how the university, for example, affects how people feel. A few years ago, we moved out of Dubai, and as a family, we went to a place called Al Quain, which is about 40 minutes north of Dubai. And I'm poking around the boatyard there at the marina, and the lad comes out and we're talking, and he got me name. He's, do you know George Mitchell by any chance?
Classic.
Like, Christ, and this is like the story of my life. You'd be in the middle of the Mojave Desert and somebody goes, "Do you know George Mitchell?" What? But yeah, that's why when I've done stuff out here with people and got involved with people who have connections to the region, they've got this warmth, got this desire to see the region do well, not just the football club, the region, because they've been there, they've experienced it, they've got the passion, they've got the heart, they've got the feel for that club, city, community thing that we bang on about.
Yeah.
And what my dad says is right. It's like somebody from Singapore should have passion for the region because we've got so many connections that people don't understand. We've got family connections in that region now. My dad's cousin has an engineering company just across the causeway from Singapore.
Yeah.
And okay, the lad's an Aberdeen fan, but he's Aberdeen first, Newcastle second. Yeah. Because my dad's uncle was Newcastle first and Aberdeen second. And so and so many people in the whole sort of Asia, Pan Asia, really have this connection, and you want to see it, and that's why, you know, to see somebody from Singapore interested was quite exciting. And now I see this, and it's just like it's a regurgitation of the stuff that they're trying to garner more credibility on the back of the fact that they've been decimated from the stuff they did the first time round. They've been totally exposed. You know, all these Photoshop pictures and everything else that was going on. And with due respect to Michael Chopper, I'm quite sure he was quite keen to get any deal done, but I'm sure he had self-interest in mind in that as well, because that's obviously what a lot of these things come down to. And super frustrating, you know. But I just don't see it. I don't see anybody who gives them any degree of credibility anymore. And that's the bottom line. They're trying to just cover their own asses. They're having trouble. They're getting criticism from left, right, and centre, even in Singapore. So, you know.
It's interesting what you say there, Mitch, as well, because, you know, if my memory serves me right, I mean, Steve, you know, you were part of the reason why Amanda came up in 2017 to that Liverpool game, and you sat with her and met her. And, you know, from what I can gather from talking to you, that they had it. She knew about the club. She knew about Newcastle United. She knew about the city. She only lived 100 miles away in North Yorkshire, and she brought up there. But when she came, she got the bug. She bought into what you had told her, and what other people had told her, and what, you know, probably her parents had told her, or friends had told her about Newcastle United, and she witnessed it firsthand. But it was also new to her husband, who probably had never been to Newcastle before, or had never tasted the experience of St James's Park on a match day, and he got it as well. And, you know, whether he was a Chelsea fan or an Arsenal fan, or, you know, some, you know, PSG, whoever it happened to be, I don't know. But he obviously got it. And what they've then done for the last 2 years is they've had that bug, and they were bitten by it, and they were so keen to from what they saw, to be able to take the club forward, and to be able to buy the football club, and to go out and actually sell the club to partners of the size of PIF, and to bring those people on board, and to get them to buy into their dream, because that was obviously her dream, and her husband's dream, her dad, and she talked to the Rubens, and they saw it because they had a connection with the Northeast as well. But to actually go out and to convince the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia that this was the place to be was huge, absolutely massive. And that exactly as Neil's saying about Singapore, and George is saying about Singapore, and about buying into it and the connection. Those people had the connection, and they've sold that connection. They had sold that dream that they had. They've brought somebody in. They had brought somebody into their dream, and I think that's what was exciting about the PIF bid, and the fact that, you know, up until June it looked like it was going through. You know, until certain people got involved in the Premier League. And you mentioned earlier about the court case, Stephen. Yes, that's the sort of dirty linen that will be watched in public if they're not very careful. And the more that Newcastle fans have dug in, and the more that the press have dug in, and the more we've been able to expose and show the contempt of people like Masters when they've sat in front of parliamentary select committees, or when they've made statements in the press that have been totally counterproductive to what's actually happened and what we've actually witnessed over the last 3 months, in terms of how their statements are totally contrary to what we've seen and what we've heard. That dirty linen is going to be absolutely scruffy dirty, isn't it? This is Sunday League dirt. This is after playing on the muddy pitches of a Sunday League pitch, and it's stuck in the laundry and come out, and it's got to be put back in again. It's that dirty, quite frankly.
Chris Moore, thanks for becoming a member. Much appreciated. George, a lot of questions coming in for you. I told you we could have ended up doing a full show with you tonight. Michael Hurst wants to know, question for George, what is your top 11 players for Newcastle that you've watched?
Goalkeeper Ronnie Simpson, right back Bobby Cowell, left back, Ron Batty, half-backs, Harvey, Brennan, Eiley, across the front row, Tommy Walker, Ernie Taylor, Jackie Milburn, George Hanna, and Bobby Mitchell. And on the subs bench, well, you could pick another dozen for the subs bench, but they're the ones I could think off the top of my head that I've actually seen. Obviously, my favourite, Jackie Milburn. I mean, it's interesting that having said that, Newcastle were trying to get me to sign forms. Alec Tate came to me after one match on a Saturday morning and said they want you up at St James's Park. So I went up with him in his car, and when I got there, he said, "Go into the boot room. There's somebody in there wants to speak to you." So I went into the boot room, and who should be sitting there but Jackie Milburn? Well, I would have signed anything for Jackie Milburn, but it was warm. Now I don't see that kind of warmth in the club at the moment. But it just was that great feeling of being before somebody who was huge, was massive, but such a gentleman, such a lovely man as well.
I could have 100 fans on this show, and not one of them would not have Alan Shearer in the team, and that's the beauty of your team. Alan Shearer doesn't even make the bench.
Yeah, he would on the bench. Yeah, he definitely on the bench.
No George Robledo, says Barry Hogan. It's as if it's sacrilege.
Well, it's an ear thing. It's an ear thing, but it depends how you wanted to play it. If you wanted to play football, I would suggest my 11 will play football. If you want somebody to batter the defence down and win by hard knocks, then you've got Shearer, Wyn Davis, and George Robledo in the middle. You wouldn't get the best football necessarily, though.
God, you should be alongside Steve Bruce, George. There's no doubt about that. Tim Cairns is saying, who's your worst player that you've ever seen pull on a black and white shirt?
Oh, well, we're not far away from the one that's playing at the moment, I'm afraid. Neil and Steve will know is that when we buy new players, I like to look at them in the first couple of games and see what they've got that makes them a footballer. Have they got the physique, or do they look like an athlete? What's their first touch like? How do they resist a tackle? How do they go into a tackle? That sort of thing. And I love to see all of that. What makes them a footballer. I hate to say it about anybody, but that lad, Joe Linton, I'm still struggling to find what it is that makes him a footballer, to be honest. First touch, not very good. Tackle, he's on his backside. He has looked like scoring the odd good goal like he did the other night at wherever it was, at Morecambe. But it was a flash. It's a flash in the pan. Well, for 40 million, you can't afford to have flash in the pan. We're used to people that come in for lots of money, like Malcolm McDonald, and in their first game they score a hat trick. That's the sort of thing. But even
Jackie Milburn must be rolling in his grave at Joe Linton wearing that shirt.
Dear me. Well, not just Jackie. I mean, yes, last night you lads mentioned some more. I mean, Albert Stubbins, Charlie Wayman, Roy Bentley. They were all Newcastle number 9s, and at least 2 of them went on to play for England for other clubs, and some of them couldn't get games. That's why they left. So yes, I mean, somebody like Jackie Milburn would be just absolutely. But in fairness to Joe Linton, I don't know what happens to Joe Linton inside the dressing room and at the training ground. My guess is if Jackie Milburn had been there, he'd have been the first one to take that lad away in the corner and put his arm around his shoulder and say, "What can we do to help you, bunny lad?" Because I've seen him do it to young players when I was involved. Somebody's had a bit of a stinker. And it was never huge criticism immediately. It was always, well, let's have a look at what went wrong and what can we do to help you to put it right and that sort of thing. I don't know that anything like that's happening to Joe Linton. I'll just get the feeling that the other thing he's not helping himself. I understand he's not learning English, which is an absolute disgrace for a professional coming to a different country to not learn English. I mean, it just. But as I say,
He's not the first, George. He's not the first. There's a couple in the recent past who've done exactly the same. We're getting lots of questions for you, George. Worst manager?
Oh, I think Gordon Lee.
Gordon Lee. I think you'd mentioned definitely. That earlier, didn't you? Yeah, you did say that. Chris is spot on. Mark Cooper says George should be giving Bruce tactical help. Hashtag 9Talk says Win Davies was quality, George.
He certainly was.
Who was the best captain? Says Diane Byrne.
Oh, Harvey by a mile. School are not far behind. But Harvey was the manager on the field. He wasn't just a captain. For example, trying to think who we were playing. I think it was Huddersfield, and the Huddersfield fullback was kicking Bobby Mitchell into the Gallagher every time he got the ball. And Harvey didn't just shout. Harvey for 10 minutes swapped places with Bobby Mitchell. And the next thing is the fullback was lying on his backside in the Gallagher corner. And then things got back to normal, and Bobby Mitchell had quite a good game. You know, that's the kind of thing that Joe Harvey would do on the pitch that made huge difference. I mean, Joe would never pretend to be a great intellect, but by his football nous was fantastic. His football nous was great. So yes, best captain was Joe Harvey, not far behind Schooler, and that brings us to a personal memory of Schooler. I was playing in an ends game against Everton at St James's Park on a very wet and snowy day, and the cinder track round the pitch was all ice, and there was a kid playing for Everton called O'Hara, who I was against, and as we went to the touchline for a tackle, I just kind of lifted my hip a little bit, and the poor kid went on his face along the cinder track, you know, and he was no skin from there down to his knees. And after the match, I was coming off, and Jimmy Schooler was standing in the players' tunnel, and my dad was just over the top in the terrace in the galley, in the terrace next to the players' tunnel. And my dad says, as I walked past Jimmy Schooler, my dad heard him say, "He's a nasty little bugger, isn't he?" and I mean, Jimmy Schooler had a reputation of not taking any prisoners, so that was quite a compliment as far as I was concerned.
Oh, you're getting lots of compliments tonight, George. People are saying it's a genuine pleasure listening to George. The questions keep coming in. But I want to get back onto Lascelles. Thanks for that, guys. I mean, George, I know, is quite keen to come back on, so we're more than happy to have George on. And I think with some of his reminiscing, it might be a good idea to get him on the show we did last night, the Retro Show, because I think he'd give us some great stories from back in the day, if you were up for that, George.
Yes, I would love to, yeah.
No, that would be fantastic. Steve, come to you about Lascelles. Haven't really discussed it a great deal, once or twice I can think of on the show, but Martin Nesbitt was asking, do we think that he's regressed? Do you think he's got worse under Bruce? I think we all know I haven't been a huge fan of Lascelles. I put him up, he's a bit like Titus Bramble for me. You know, there's a bit of nervousness in there. There's a Rick in there every game. You know, what's your take on Lascelles, and should he really be the captain?
He doesn't look as mobile as he was a couple of seasons ago. He doesn't look as confident. He was when he had that spat, when he stood up to certain players in the changing room and basically made himself captain by his attitude, and he doesn't seem to be the same player anymore. He's not the dominating centre half. He's not the captain on the pitch anymore that we saw in those early performances that he was putting in. He seems to be. Has he regressed? Possibly. Have the injuries that he's had taken their toll? Has he lost a bit of pace? Did he have a bit of pace? I'm not too sure. He certainly doesn't seem as aggressive as he was. He seems to be a lot more standoffish. And I know that people think that the partnership between him and Fernandez is the best sort of central defensive partnership, which, you know, perhaps that's correct. I mean, but what we're seeing him on his backside an awful lot more. We're seeing him out of position an awful lot more. We're seeing him moving across the back line without the intensity that he had. and the determination. You know, we're not seeing him covering a fullback and actually sliding in and taking the player and taking the ball, or more importantly, taking the ball and leaving the player. What we're seeing is more of a standoffish type of challenge, and it just does not seem to be, in my mind, the same player as I say that he was a couple of seasons ago. Is that because he's overconfident? Is it because he's cruising? You know, he's the captain and the club captain, so he feels as though, you know, he's almost guaranteed a place in the team. I'm not too sure because I don't know the lad and I've never met him, and I don't know what sort of a personality he is. I can only go by what I see on the pitch, and what I see is someone who I don't think is putting in the performances that he did 2 seasons ago under Rafa. And Rafa obviously saw something in him to make him club captain. But Rafa, again, Rafa wasn't scared to drop players or to rest players when he felt it was the right thing to do, whether it was tactically or whether it was psychologically. I'm not too sure, but I don't think Steve Bruce plays those type of games, the mind games perhaps that Rafa did, and maybe that's another flaw in his character and in his makeup, or in his managerial style. Managers have their favourite 5 who are always going to get picked regardless, you know. And I think with English managers that tends to be something that kind of sticks. I think foreign managers are a lot more sort of keen, or not so much keen, but a lot more aware of, you know, horses for courses, picking teams, being able to rest players at the right time. But I think the British managers, and certainly the English managers in the league, they tend to be, especially the older ones, tend to be more the type that, well, you know, and as George used that phrase, run it off. They tend to be sort of, you know, picking players that they feel as though just run through a barn door regardless, you know, regardless of the skill or the attributes that they've got. They don't pick teams to while looking at the opposition. Rafa was very much a, let's look at who we're playing and let's pick a formation and let's pick a team and let's pick individuals for that particular game. Whereas I think, you know, if you're numbered 1 to 8, you're almost guaranteed. It's like the Sunday League, isn't it? You know, I used to have a standing joke with one of my pals. You know, you could turn up with 11, and he would still be named as sub. You know, it's just because you were hoping that somebody else was going to come along and were just running late. You know, and you get that impression sometimes at Newcastle that it's that. You know, because you can almost guess the team at times.
Yeah, George, what's your favourite tune match? Ian asks.
Oh, the Barcelona match. The Fairs Cup final was special, but if you want a football purist, the Barcelona game had everything, absolutely everything. Great goals, great football, great goalkeeping. Barcelona match by country mile. Yeah.
Okay, and what's your view on Lascelles?
Disappointed because a couple of years ago, I genuinely think he had a shout to be in the England squad. He did, and it just seems to have disappeared. What I find interesting is when we got throttled by Middlesbrough 5-0 in a pre-season friendly down at their place. Somebody showed a piece of video on Twitter, I think, or was it Facebook, and when the second goal went in, Lascelles went berserk with his own players, absolutely berserk, and from then on, he was lost, and I think that's why we lost 5-0. He just couldn't take any more, sort of thing, and he doesn't seem to have the command presently on the field that he had a couple of years ago, and makes the sort of schoolboy mistake he would never have made a couple of years ago. I mean, I forget what game it was. He tried to clear a ball with his right foot that he should have hacked into the stands with his left foot, and that was never him. He would have just, even if he'd need it, he wouldn't let it cross his body like he did for the forward to get it. So yes, I'm very disappointed for him and for us, because a couple of years ago, he was a genuine contender for England, from my point of view.
Yeah, okay. And Neil, your views on Lascelles before we look ahead to tomorrow's game?
Look, I still think he has the ability as a young man to be a leader. That's why he was given the captaincy at a young age. Does he miss the direction that Rafa used to give a lot?
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of it. You know, I remember the tale that both my dad and Steve tell about spending time with Rafa after a game once, and Rafa was doing all this tactical stuff with bloody was it potato wedges on the table?
Yes,
and he ended up with potato all over his finger. You know, and you look at the amount of direction he used to give to players on the pitch. And did that make a massive difference to Lascelles? And is that what he's now missing? And as a result of that, is he now frustrated? So is that why the incident at Middlesbrough happened? Because he got sent off in that game, if you remember, you know, for fighting with a forward. Because probably he'd lost his blob. But if he's lost his blob and he's lost his direction, you can't be a captain if you're doing that. So was that, again, I don't want to come back to Rafa. I don't want to come back to look backwards. We've got to look forwards. Don't like it. But is he a lesser player because nobody's getting hold of him and saying, do this, do this, do this? Bearing in mind, our current manager is allegedly the best centre-half who didn't play for England.
Yeah.
And he should have an ability to get hold of centre-halves and say, think about this, think about that, think about what you're doing in this situation. Do this, do that. You know, the direction can come in a different way. It doesn't have to be direct on the pitch, on the sideline, the way Rafa used to do. And that's the thing that frustrates me about him. He's gone backwards. There's no doubt about that. The other thing about him, he got that ankle injury. Has he lost a half a yard of pace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's possible.
No, at his age, that might come back, but it's not there now. Yeah. And you've got to remember, for certain defenders, pace excuses positional faults. Young defenders get out of jail because they've got the pace to get in the position they should have been in the first place. And if he's lost half a yard of pace, that'll show the Premier League.
Yeah, no, it will. I mean, for me, as I say, Lascelles has never been a player that I've actually, valued at Newcastle. I thought he was raw talent when he was first signed. Obviously, Rafa, formed a very defensive team, and I just haven't seen any progression. And potential England selection extra never actually came about. And then, as I say, Steve Bruce has come in, and for a centre half, it's just bizarre. It really is bizarre that from our perspective, he hasn't been able to progress. Anyway, let's look ahead to tomorrow's game. And Newcastle United are live on Sky again, 8 o'clock kickoff, and it's home to Sean Dyche's Burnley. Team news: Dubravka, Dwight Gale, Matt Ritchie are all still sidelined. There are doubts, as you'll have seen on some of the comments tonight, over Jamal Lascelles and Emil Kraft. Although Kraft probably wasn't expected to feature against Burnley. Speaking today at the press conference, again, as we touched on at the top of the show, Steve Bruce is hoping that Alan Saint-Maximin will feature. There have been sightings of him at the training ground, and hopefully he will be fit to be selected. From a Burnley point of view, Matt Loughton is missing out, and there's fitness doubts over Robbie Brady and Johan Berg Goodmanson. Ashley Barnes has made a comeback. Obviously, Burnley, though, struggling a little bit, and they will be looking to kickstart their Premier League season. Now, it's an interesting game, Steve. How do you see it going?
Two dinosaur managers, to be perfectly honest. I know people rave about Sean Dyche and what he's done at Burnley, but I consider them to be two dinosaur managers. They were dinosaur footballers. The comments that Dyche made about Steve Bruce, absolutely praising Steve Bruce for the way that he sets his team up, that they're organised and all that, and I was just like, what? Is this a wind-up? Must be. Because that's what he come out with at his press conference. So he was praising Newcastle United, but praising Bruce. And I thought one of the girls from the ladies' show on Monday. She commented about that and where does that comment come from? And it is as though that the League Managers Association have this sort of like England core, So within it, there's like another group that are all gonna bandy together and all gonna safeguard each other, and they're all only gonna say nice things about each other, and it's sickening to listen to. Now I don't want to hear a press conference where managers are praising the opposition in the way that Bruce praised Newport. You praise them after the game, you don't praise them before the game. You go into war, you're going into battle, you're going in to win 3 points. You're not going into there to like have all this lovey-dovey, slap each other on the back and tell everybody, tell the opposition how wonderful they are. But it seems to have crept into the game. And it seems to be since the League Managers Association formed into what is basically, a multi-millionaires club who just want to spout praise on each other to keep each other in a job. I'm not actually looking forward to the game, to be perfectly honest, Steve. I haven't enjoyed any of the Newcastle games this season, and if I'm perfectly honest, I'm setting myself up for a defeat.
Yeah, I've got to be perfectly honest. I'm doing the same. We'll get the predictions before we finish. George, obviously Burnley tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. What's your take on tomorrow night's game? How do you see it going?
Well, I can't see it being a classic, that's for sure. I would like to think we'd sneak a single goal win. However, they do have one of our bogey players in Wood, the big centre forward. If he's fit and playing, then we're going to struggle. There's no doubt about that. Especially where the centre backs are playing at the moment. He always likes to score against us, and I think he'll give us a tough time. I have a soft spot for Burnley, though. Can I tell me Burnley's story, Steve? Steve,
go for it, George. Go for it.
When I was involved in playing as a schoolboy, the only other club other than Newcastle that really took a serious interest in me was Burnley. And I remember one Sunday morning there was a knock at the front door, and I opened it. There was this very smart guy in a very smart tan overcoat, the sort of thing that Malcolm Allison used to wear. Absolutely lovely coat. Asking to see me father. So in he came, and he sat down, and out of his coat, because he looked like he had a poacher's pocket on every side of it, he pulled out this bottle of Lamb's Navy rum. And I thought, hello, this is serious stuff, because that just happened to be my dad's favourite tipple. And what he'd come to ask me father was, could I be allowed to go to Burnley for a fortnight's trial? And because my father was saying, no, he's too young to do that. And so I seen the Lamb's Navy room get opened. And then I was sent off to the shop to get some fags. But by the time I came back, I was going to Burnley. And I never understood what went on in between. The next day, a van from Mountford's TV company on Teignmouth Road in Howden pulled up at the door and brought out the biggest television I'd ever seen in my life. Well, we didn't have a telly then. And in it came, it was installed and ready to run. And apparently that was me fee for going to Burnley.
Brilliant.
Both family. And I went for 2 weeks, and it was great. But you could always tell you were in Bob Lord country, because the landlady of the house we lived in, and a lad called Carty Simpson from South Shields was with us, and one or two others. And every meal had either a pie or a sausage or something, which was made by Bob Lord, the Burnley chairman. And then the fortnight was up. We went back to the train. The man that came to the house, by the way, was Burnley's chief scout, Charlie Ferguson, who managed Gateshead for a little while. Were a lovely man, Aberdonian, played for Aberdeen, played for Scotland. And he came back on the train with the lads. And Alan Brown was the manager of Burnley, and he saw off. The club will be in touch with you after the weekend. We'll let you know what's happening and all the rest of it. Well, it never happened, because when we got home Monday morning in the Journal, Alan Brown was appointed manager of Sunderland. So never got the letter from Burnley, but one of the players got a letter from Sunderland, and I've mentioned his name because you'll know him straight away. Seth Irwin. Seth Irwin went to Burnley with me, and he got a letter, but not from Burnley, from Sunderland. So there you are. And I've always had a warm spot for Burnley since then. So narrow win, I hope.
Okay, Mitch.
Narrow win. I think that's exactly it. I think we should have enough. We should do enough. Wood bothers me if he's fit. Yeah. Because he always seems to do well against us. And I have to say, this whole concept that we've got at the moment about giving British managers a chance, this could be a horrible game of football from the purist's point of view. But as ever, you take 3 points if they come. And we should have enough. Depends which one of us turns up. Is it the West Hamers, or is it the Brightons? You just don't know, and you can't trust it. You can't make that call. So let's go for the optimist view and take an narrow win. Okay, you're both going for narrow win. Steve, are you predicting a defeat there?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, somebody put up there about Bruce and Dyche, and you know what? The difference between the two is Dyche is an angry manager, and Bruce isn't, and that's about it. One's an angry dinosaur, and the other one's a friendly dinosaur. And I think we'll get beat. Maybe it's 1-0.
Okay. I'm going to sleep on it. I'm going to give my prediction tomorrow. Yes, we're doing a pre-match. We are doing match day live. We are doing match day live tomorrow. 7 o'clock we'll start as soon as the team's announced. So we'll be taking you through with a selection of people. I can see what the team is before I make my prediction, which will be good. Got to say happy birthday to 2 former players. Billy Askew. He doesn't look like that anymore.
The last piece of the jigsaw.
Big happy birthday to Big Billy, and happy birthday to John Robertson as well. That Greenhall strip, dear me, that gave me some nightmares. Well, it gave me mum some nightmares. She had to stitch it on, and it was wonky, and I never forgive her. But yeah, it was one of those.
Has he found his way home yet?
He's still homesick.
Anyway, we're getting loads of praise. Lots of people saying great show. Everyone's thoroughly enjoyed it, which is great stuff. George, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on tonight.
Thank you. It was a thrill being with you.
Can I just say something? Thank you for making this happen. This guy, he's not just my dad, he's my mate. And if I can be half the man he is, I know I've done all right. And thank you.
Well, it's special to be on It's special to be on with my son, my adopted son that looks after us when I go to the match after we've had an hour at the food bank stand, and with a fraternal brother as well. That you can't get much better than that, Steve. So thank you very much.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad I managed to sort it out, George, and you've made such an impression. We'll definitely get you back on. As I say, I think the Retro Show would be great because you've got some wonderful stories. Yeah. You've got some great memories. So hopefully get you back on next Thursday if you're available. And you lads, stay safe. Look forward to catching up with you after the Burnley match. And have a good night tonight. Get yourself back to the bar, Mitch. And thanks for everybody for watching. Give it a like. Give it a share. Thanks to our sponsors, as always. Big shout out again to Darren Baldwin's Funerals and to Q-Tech. Thanks very much, lads. Until next time, take care. Good night. God bless. We wish you well.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.